Superman and Lois, Season 3, Episode 4, Too Close to Home. We open this episode with Superman and Jordan fighting a forest fire. Superman leaves to check on Lois and Jordan fights the fire on his own. While fighting the fire, Jordan's hood falls down, exposing the back of his head and his big, bushy hair. The DOD gets pictures of him like this. His hair from the back is very recognizable, and his grandfather, General Lane, who is in charge of the DOD, tells him that he has to get a haircut and start wearing glasses to maintain his anonymity because, well, his big bushy hair is very recognizable, which is something we've been talking about for some time. Like, how is Jordan running around doing these things and not getting caught?
Well, in general, how is bushy hair such a signature thing that's any different than any other different hairstyle?
I don't know. If it was red, he'd look like Ronald McDonald, but whatever.
I understand the whole concept was the kid, the teenager, he was being told he had to get his hair cut, and so that was a problem for him because that's a fashion statement that Grandpa later says he acknowledges. I don't see how bushy hair is a giveaway. The larger problem is Jordan going around doing this stuff to begin with. People don't have cameras taking pictures of this stuff.
Yeah, like everywhere.
Hey, there's this kid that seems to be with Superman once in a while. I wonder who that could be.
Jordan's not happy about this. He refuses to get his hair cut. He says some nasty things to his grandfather about him not being a real hero. By the end of the episode, though, Jordan apologizes. He admits to his grandfather that his grandfather was right and says he's ready to get his hair cut. At which time, the general tells Jordan that he has found another way to get around getting a haircut, that Jordan had hurt his feelings, but he forgives him. And at that time, he gives Jordan his very own super suit with a hood on it. He also gives him the goggles that his own father had worn when he was fighting in World War II. That was actually a really good way to wrap up that story in that particular episode. I found that to be a good way of working that out. I thought this was a return to how this show previously had been as far as conflict between the characters and working that out in the episode in a healthy way. You know, it may not be the most realistic presentation of how that would have gone down in real life, but this isn't supposed to be realistic. This is supposed to be the ideal and showing people how it's done. So I thought this was actually really well done. So I was happy with that part of the episode. Next, we see how Clark is handling Lois with her illness, because he left that forest fire. He left Jordan there to fight it on his own because he heard Lois drop and break a glass, and she is not happy that he is using his super hearing to keep tabs on her. He doesn't listen to what she's trying to tell him, unfortunately, and he tells the boys that they are not to bother their mother with any of their problems because she is recovering from her first round of chemo. That is really what kicks off this whole episode, because the theme of this episode really seems to be honesty. And it's proven by the end of the episode that keeping things from Lois, I mean, this is Lois Lane, the reporter. Good luck keeping anything from her. But anyway, so Clark is home with Lois. They're watching TV. John Henry has figured out that the weapon that had been used against Superman in the previous episode was designed by him of this universe. So he went over to tell Clark and Lois about this. Clark admits that they already knew that they had been investigating Mannheim behind his back, and that Lois had actually gone to see his sister and ask her about the John Henry of this universe. Understandably, John Henry is not happy about this because he told them to stay out of it. This is when Lois walks up to Clark and John Henry and they pretend like nothing's going on. Later on in the episode, Clark says he's going to go to the store for popcorn, but he goes to John Henry's instead. And he tells John Henry what his sister had said about this universe as him selling weapons to Mannheim. He also tells John Henry that she's the one who recommended Lois get all those tests. That's how they found out that she had cancer. John Henry tells Clark that he's going to talk to his sister and that Mannheim's assassin saw him when the assassin went after Lana, and in order to keep Natalie safe, he needs to know everything there is to know about the him of this earth, which makes sense. However, Then John Henry walks up to his sister in the middle of the street in broad daylight. I was sitting there watching that thinking, boy, for a real smart dude who's really into security, that was pretty dumb. The conversation between him and his sister, I think, went pretty well, considering that she just saw her dead brother walk up to her. And she knows about alternate universes, especially after season 2. And so she pretty easily accepts that that's where this John Henry is from. However, it was still very difficult for her because this guy looks like her dead brother, aside from all the scars that he has. And she tells him what she knows after he discloses that he has a daughter he has to think about. When she finally does walk away, an SUV pulls up. Of course, it's Mannheim's goons. They tell John Henry to get in. So he goes with them and goes to see Mannheim. Mannheim, of course, threatens him. He doesn't want John Henry interfering in his business. He makes it perfectly clear that he will harm John Henry's family because he has a photograph that he hands to John Henry of his sister with a bomb strapped to her. Fortunately, John Henry recognized the bomb as something that he had actually designed. And this was actually a really cool scene. He discreetly calls his suit using his watch. He tells Mannheim to go to hell, and he jumps out the window. The suit comes, and it assembles around him, and he flies off to go find his sister. That was a really good scene with him leaping out the window. I didn't feel like the CGI was bad of, the suit assembling or anything like that. I enjoyed that scene. He recognized the tech that was used for the bomb as something that he designed. So he's able to scan for that, and he finds his sister. He disarms the bomb and saves her. And then he goes back and confronts Mannheim. But Mannheim says that he has people in place already in New Orleans to kill John Henry's family if anything happens to Mannheim. John Henry lets Mannheim go, but in the meantime, he is making plans to protect his family. Clark and Lois agree with his plan that he's going to take a few weeks, get security in place, and then they're going to start going after Mannheim. Meanwhile, Lois has decided to change her cancer treatments to a facility that Mannheim has donated a lot of money to, so he has a lot of control over. She's doing this to get access to the facility. Mannheim knows that she's coming, but he's not going to do anything to her because he wants to know exactly what she's up to. Even though I think this is probably a really dumb plan, because why would you trust your cancer care to a place that's run by a guy who wants to get rid of you? In the meantime, it looks like she's going to be able to get her cancer care there, at least until the situation changes between these two groups. Jonathan went over to his girlfriend's trailer, Candice, but she is not home. Instead, her dad answers the door, tells him to stop spreading lies about him, about the stolen truck and his drug dealing, etc. Jonathan isn't having any of it. Candice's dad just smacks him one right in the eye. So when Jonathan gets home, Lois sees his eye, but he won't tell her what happened because Clark told the boys not to bother her. Needless to say, Clark gets an earful when he gets home from John Henry's, so that just kind of compounded the problem for him. He and Lois are both talking to Jonathan when Jordan walks in the door. Then the boys have to confess about Jonathan's truck getting stolen and them going and getting it back. Superman gets called to the DOD by Lois's dad. It turns out that the DOD had a bunch of Superman's blood left over after his fight with Space Karen at the end of season 2. Allegedly, they were only keeping it as backup in case anything like that ever happened again, and it was supposed to be held under tight security, but that's where Mannheim got Superman's blood from, so security really wasn't that good, and not to mention they really shouldn't have been doing that without his consent. Superman destroys all the blood that they have right there. Hopefully they don't have any more. Not that it matters because Mannheim's got the blood already, so whatever. While Superman is at the DOD, Lois is getting to the bottom of who hit Jonathan. And when she finds out, she goes to Candice's trailer and confronts her dad. He threatens her with a gun. She doesn't bat an eye because this guy is a major idiot thinking that he and his gun could intimidate Lois Lane. I mean, she's dealt with people who are far more dangerous than he could ever dream of being. This character is being written as a real idiot. But I'll get more into that at the end, because again, this goes back into something that I mentioned in the previous episode about this character. So when Clark gets home, he finds out what happened. He goes to find Candice's dad. He's eating at the diner where Candice works. Lana, Kyle, and Sarah are already at the diner. They're trying to move past Lana slapping Sarah. Kyle found out what Sarah said that caused Lana to slap her in the first place. And this just goes back to this whole season. Sarah's character just isn't working for me because she's behaving like she's about 5 years younger than she is in the show. In child development, 5 years is a huge span of time. The way this character is written this season is just ruining her, so I really hope that I really hope this is the end of that, because she is just behaving in a ridiculously childish manner for a character who's supposed to be 16 years old. Lana, Kyle, and Sarah are sitting in the diner when Clark walks in to confront Candice's dad. Clark wanted to take it outside and not have the conversation in front of his daughter, but Candice's dad refused, gets up and tries to hit Clark. It was actually a really cool scene with Clark just standing there while Candice's dad tried to attack him, because, I mean, this is Superman. He's like, it's like trying to run into a brick wall.
Yeah, the dad was trying to push Clark and instigate some sort of fight. So he went to push Clark, and it's like he hit a building. Clark didn't move a single inch, and the guy bounced backwards off of him. And then that guy's face after that happened, he was really surprised at what happened.
Yeah, I'll hand it to the guy playing Candice's dad. He really did an excellent job with what he was told to do. So there is that. Clark easily deflects his fist. And he puts Candice's dad's face right into the lunch counter, and everybody in the diner is watching. Clark tells him that if he ever threatens his family again, steals or sells drugs, Clark's going to be coming for him. Candice's dad, he hightails it out of there, and apparently he doesn't even stop when he gets to the county line. Candice is now staying with the Kents until she can find other arrangements, so this is going to be interesting to see how that works out. Overall, I liked most of this episode. It had a clear theme about honesty and family, and I really liked the scenes that John Henry and Clark got as far as their action in this episode. However, I'm still not happy with the only adult character in town who lives in a trailer being portrayed as such a piece of shit. It reminds me of when Disney got called out several years ago now for their villains mostly being people who were physically unattractive in some way. How that was seen as being, well, not good. Because that's how I feel about how they're portraying this guy who lives in a trailer. It's a lot like that. Ugly people are bad. That's the message that they're sending, except this time it's poor white trash who live in a trailer, they're bad. If you live in a trailer, you're a bad person. If they had other people in this town who lived in a trailer or seemed to be financially destitute or even just poor, and they were portraying them as decent people just struggling to get by, I wouldn't feel like this. But the problem is that everybody else in this series, nobody else is poor like this. The only poor person like this is Candice's family. And her dad is being portrayed as this beer-drinking, gun-owning, flag-waving piece of shit. That does not sit well with me.
My hope is that this is not what it appears to be. Because when Candice's father was talking to Lois, well, actually first talking to the son and then Lois, there were a couple of lines that led me to believe that maybe that dad was being honest about you don't know the whole situation. I'm hoping that somehow he's being coerced, because I'm guessing that he might be part of Intergang, which I believe is what Mannheim is running now. I'm hoping we get to see some sort of full circle there. When Candice was going to move in with Clark and Lois, she did mention to Lois that her dad was all that she had as far as family. I'm hoping that the writers have something more in store here, and it's more than face value here. I'm hoping that watch was placed to try to get leverage on this guy, and he's just in a bad situation and is scared. So we'll see if the writers actually have the foresight to do something like that. But that still doesn't take away, why are you picking on the one guy in town that lives in a trailer? Because you didn't have to pick that one to do this story with.
Well, plus, that's not going to change the fact that he punched Jonathan. Nothing is going to stop that from being bad. One thing that did cross my mind, if these writers really wanted to subvert our expectations, they could make it so that Candice was actually the one who stole Jonathan's truck, or set it up to be stolen, and she framed her dad. And, maybe Candice is the one working for Mannheim, and now she's right there in Lois Lane's household. That's also a possibility, but I highly doubt these writers are going to go in that direction. I think it's far more likely that they are demonizing the poor white man. And I know some people are going to get angry that I said that, but sorry, everybody, I grew up in a trailer. So don't you dare come to me and tell me all these people who live in trailers, all the poor white trash, they're all horrible people, because that's not true. And I'm not going to sit back while people demonize people like myself, basically everybody I grew up with, because we are not bad people just because we were poor or are poor currently. I'm not having that anymore. I'm sick of this shit. So I'm going to push back. If you don't like it, find a different channel. That's all I have to say about that.
You mentioned the visual effects as far as when John Henry jumped off the building and the suit assembled around him, and you said it was well done, and I agree. Even the episode itself started out with that forest fire, and it was really well done. This season has been really weird, because in the first episode of this season, when you had the fight between Adam-Man and Superman into that gas tanker, that was well done. But then there's been some iffy green screening with Clark. It looks like a green screen when he's looking over the city or looking over the planet trying to hear something. So it's really weird the way the visual effects between episodes. Sometimes it looks really good. This episode, the forest fire and the John Henry suit, it looked really good, but then other episodes, it's like, is this an asylum production? What's going on here?
Yeah, that is a little bit weird. But then again, we know that these episodes aren't filmed in order. I'm sure they don't do the CGI in order either. So perhaps CGI that came last was prioritized lower and they didn't have as much money left to spend on it. I don't know. But you make an excellent point with, some of the CGI, they do an excellent job and it looks really good. And then some of it, not so much. This is one of the episodes that looked really good. Yeah, if you're into cool scenes like that, the scene with John Henry when he leapt out of Mannheim's window, that was a good scene.
And we've been complaining for this season about the melodrama. And there's a difference between melodrama and drama. I do think for the most part we got drama in this episode. This was an improvement over what has been happening before. The family conflict that Lana was going through with her daughter. I like the fact that they did bring up, because you brought this up an episode or two ago, that Kyle brought up to his daughter about when she tried to commit suicide and how Lana was frantically left there to try to resuscitate her daughter while she was waiting for the ambulance. So that was nice that they didn't forget about that. And I also like the fact that they pointed out that the reason the slap was a big deal, the slap itself isn't so good, but there was a conversation piece that led me to believe that Lana's parents were probably in a physically abusive relationship based on some of the dialogue that was there. Kyle told his daughter, he said, look, I'm not justifying what your mom did, but don't judge your mother on her worst day. You wouldn't like to be judged on your worst day, would you? I thought that was really well stated. I thought that was a good message to bring up to somebody. None of us are perfect. We all have bad days. We all have good days. The diner scene reminded me a little bit, if you remember Superman 2, when Clark lost his powers and was getting picked on, and then later on when he got his abilities back, he went to that diner. It wasn't exactly the same, but it kind of had that feeling to it. As I said, I thought it was well done when this guy, because at first he wasn't punching, he got up and he just tried to run in and push Clark. I don't know how they did the effect, but they showed Clark didn't move at all, and this guy bounced off him like he was running into a building, and then he threw a punch at Clark, and then Clark grabbed him and put him down on the counter. I don't know about the fight itself. I don't know what else the writers could have done there, but I just don't see Clark Superman getting into a physical altercation like that with a standard mortal. I can understand they wanted to do something to try to stop the situation.
I I thought Clark did a really good job of avoiding a physical altercation with this guy. He easily could have just put his head right through that lunch counter.
Right, but then people would have figured out what was going on.
Well, exactly, yeah. But, I mean, this guy, unfortunately, he doesn't understand anything other than violence.
That's why I'm hoping there's a little bit more to his story, that maybe it doesn't justify what he's doing. Just like with Lana slapping her daughter, it doesn't justify what she did. But I'm hoping that this dad is under some sort of external pressures that we don't know about yet. At least I'm hoping that's the case. So it's not just the guy in the trailer park just acting up and being a good old boy.
Yeah.
Overall, I think I enjoyed this episode. It had a lot of feeling of it could have been a season 1 or season 2 episode, probably a season 2 episode. There was a lot of drama in the city, but it wasn't melodrama for the most part. It helped move things along. The only thing I didn't seem to like, and maybe this is just trying to delve in a little bit with Lois, but Lois was making all sort of judgment calls on Clark. Her being put in bad situations by him not telling the truth. Well, Lois put Clark in a bad situation with John and Henry at the beginning of the episode. I don't really like the fact that Lois isn't owning up to she's making mistakes as well. And I'm not really sure why they're painting Lois exactly like this. I mentioned last week her personality type, the chemo, that's just who she is. At the same time, she's making mistakes along with Clark. And I just wish that she would own up to those mistakes, because she was behaving very badly leading up to the chemo. I'm not going to say that this episode gave us that Jonathan character plot that I wanted to try to connect with this new actor, but at least the story with Candice, at least there was a little bit for him to work with, so I got to know that character portrayal a little bit. That at least was a step forward. I still wish they would do an episode where he's like the center of a plot, A or B plot, so that I could really get to know the kid and the character. I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I think they did a little bit of development with him here.
I would agree with that.
For me, I think this was a step in the right direction. I'm hoping that this goes somewhere interesting. I was actually involved with the John Henry stuff. I was actually paying attention. That was interesting. I just wish they would do more of that type of stuff and maybe only have 1 or 2 little side stories of Smallville family. Because I can usually go an A and a B, maybe an A, B, or C. But there were like 3 or 4 different things going on here in the town this week. And I don't know if they all had to be dealt with in this episode. It's not like it was a bad episode. It's just like, did Sarah and Lana really have to have their stuff resolved in this episode? Or did Candice and her father have to be resolved in this episode? Like, did it all have to happen in this episode?
I can see where you're coming from on that.
It's not that each of those plots was bad, just did you have to put them all together at once? And I'm curious to see what Jordan's going to be like in this new superhero suit that Grandpa got for him. The goggles are going to be interesting to see if he looks kind of quote-unquote dorky, but we'll see how that goes. I still wish they would address a little bit more how dangerous it is for Jordan to be bouncing around like this, but at least the costume makes it so I'm a little bit more open to this, because I interpreted what Clark was doing with the forest fire, because Jordan was there with him, is I think Clark learned a lesson from the first episode when Jordan was going out on his own to try to fix things and to help people, and he didn't know what he was doing. So I think what this was is Clark was taking his son under his wing and trying to show him how to do this correctly. So I'm glad they're going to get the outfit, because that was always, I mean, yes, Clark Kent with the glasses. There's a big, I got to pretend that with his glasses off that nobody can tell that's Clark Kent. But Jordan running around and nobody figuring out that that's Jordan Kent just kind of bothered me. So I hope this suit helps me not deal with that sort of potentially immersion-breaking type thing.
Yeah, it's about time that Jordan got his own suit. I'm surprised it actually took this long and that it came from his grandfather and not his dad. But hey, at least we're going to have one now, so that is definitely a step in the right direction.
Well, Clark didn't make his own suit. That was his mama that made it, so at least his first one.
Well, Lois better get sewing then.
Yeah, because I'm sure Lois can do that.
I'm sure she can.
I doubt it. She seems like a very career city girl. I think this country life is still new to her, so I'm not sure how much domestic skills that she has. I think she's the professional class type skill set, but I could be proven wrong. We'll see.
Anyway, overall, I liked this episode. I do hope in a future episode, Candice's father gets redeemed. I'm not holding out hope, but I would like to see that. Step in the right direction. Glad this episode was better than, I guess, definitely better than the previous episode, which was better than the episode before that. So I'm very hopeful for the next episode to build upon this. What did you guys think? Would you like to see Candice's dad get redeemed? What do you think about his portrayal? And how cool was that scene when John Henry jumped out the window?
Take care.